What happens when a monarch doesn't just strip a title, but erases a bloodline? This isn't about celebrity fallout. It's not gossip. It's not even politics. This is a quiet, deliberate act, one that rewrites the very structure of royal inheritance in the United Kingdom. And it's not being shouted from the palace balcony. It's sealed in ink, behind closed doors, signed under the weight of centuries of protocol and pain. But before we continue, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Today, we're not witnessing a feud between father and son. We're watching a final decision. King Charles has signed a royal decree, not a statement, not a press release, a legal instrument, binding, permanent, and shockingly direct. It revokes the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex. It strips the coat of arms granted to Harry and Meghan at the time of their marriage. And, perhaps most devastating of all, it orders the removal of their names, and their children's names, from official royal lineage records. No royal bloodline has ever been scrubbed so forcefully, not in recent memory, not in this way. And yet, most of the country doesn't even know this happened. Why? Because this moment wasn't made for the cameras. There were no trumpets, no flags lowered. Just a courier, a signature, and silence. But silence, in this case, says everything. We have confirmed through high-level royal sources and independent legal analysts that this is not just symbolic. It's constitutional. The implications are vast, affecting everything from succession to ceremonial entitlements to diplomatic representation abroad. This decree removes Harry and Meghan from every practical aspect of royal life. Not just what the public sees, but what the institution depends on behind the scenes: records, titles, ceremonial duty, recognition under the crown. But here's where it gets strange. The timing. King Charles is undergoing cancer treatment. His public appearances are limited. His health has been described, on background, as uncertain. So why now? Why issue such a permanent, brutal order while weakened, vulnerable, and, by some accounts, introspective? Is this an act of royal housekeeping, or a deeply personal reckoning? Some insiders believe this move was long planned. A culmination of years of strain, lawsuits, interviews, memoirs, and bitter accusations. But others point to something more immediate, something urgent. A document Harry reportedly submitted in his ongoing legal fight against the British tabloid press. One that allegedly contained accusations the palace could not ignore. We're still verifying that connection. But here's the thing. When the royal coat of arms is revoked, it's not just a family dispute anymore. It's constitutional history being rewritten. And it signals one thing clearly. There will be no path back for Harry, Meghan, or their children. Not now. Not later. Not even in theory. So what exactly did this royal decree say? Who knew about it before it was signed? And why was one line in the decree, just 8 words long, deemed so historically unprecedented that royal archivists requested a sealed copy for long-term preservation? We'll break it all down. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why remove a title when you can remove a legacy? The royal decree, signed quietly, without fanfare, doesn't just revoke the Sussex titles. That would have been expected. That would have fit the public narrative. But this was different. It targeted something deeper, something structural, something permanent. The language of the document, according to 2 legal analysts who've reviewed excerpts, was cold, clinical, and final. It revoked not only titles, but heraldic authority, meaning any and all rights tied to family insignia, symbolism, and recognition under the crown. It nullified Harry and Meghan's coat of arms, an emblem granted at their wedding and registered under the College of Arms. Gone. Erased. Here's the catch. Royal decrees of this magnitude are rare. Extremely rare. The last time one was issued with this level of personal consequence, the monarchy was still recovering from the abdication crisis. And that's no exaggeration. This wasn't just about names or symbols. It was about lineage. The order contains language, buried in its second half, directing the removal of Harry, Meghan, and their children from the royal succession documentation. Internal databases, ceremonial charts, official registers. Not the public-facing websites. The internal ones. The ones that matter. One royal aide, who spoke on condition of anonymity, said the tone of the document was like closing a ledger. Not an angry act. Not impulsive. just finished. And that might be the most unsettling part. Because for years, there's been this illusion that reconciliation was possible. That time, perhaps, would soften the wounds. That once the drama faded, there might be a quiet return to civility, even if only ceremonial. But this decree shatters that illusion. It locks the door, and it does so with a kind of surgical precision that's difficult to ignore. Now, here's where it gets more complicated. There were objections, not public ones, but internal resistance. Several senior courtiers reportedly argued the move was unwise, especially given Charles's health and public perception. At least one senior royal, though their identity is still unconfirmed, attempted to delay the signing. Sources suggest it may have been Prince Edward. Others think it was Princess Anne. They lost. Charles overruled the hesitation. And from what we understand, he didn't do it lightly. He waited. He reviewed the decree multiple times. And then, just before noon last Tuesday, he signed it with what one witness described as a stony resolve. So, what was in that document that made even seasoned royal advisors hesitate? And why was it delivered, not to Harry, but to the royal archives first? Because apparently, something inside the decree isn't just about titles or lineage. It's about deletion. But as brutal as the language was, it's what wasn't said in the decree that shocked even the royal archives. You can erase a name from a website, but how do you erase someone from history? That's the question one royal archivist reportedly asked, off the record, after reviewing the full contents of King Charles's decree. Because while the public headlines focused on titles and heraldry, the more chilling development was buried in what wasn't made public: the internal instructions. According to multiple sources inside the palace's administrative branch, the royal decree included a set of downstream directives, quietly circulated to staff responsible for constitutional documentation. These weren't symbolic. They were operational, precise, and their goal? To begin the systematic removal of the Sussex name from all royal succession planning documents, digital, legal, and ceremonial. Now, let's be clear. This doesn't mean Harry loses his bloodline. That can't be revoked. But it means something arguably more brutal. His bloodline no longer matters. Internal ledgers, used for royal correspondence, ceremonial seating charts, hereditary briefings, and constitutional role assignment, are being updated to reflect a new structure. One that omits Harry. One that no longer includes Archie or Lilibet in the soft line of succession, a term used to describe potential, not active, heirs. And while the UK government still maintains a formal succession list for legal purposes, palace protocol often relies on internal precedence registers, tools that shape everything from who represents the crown at events to who receives security briefings during crises. Harry is no longer on them. Neither is Meghan. Neither are their children. And that silence? It's not an oversight. It's policy. The deeper you go into this story, the more you realize how calculated the move truly was. Because while the world speculates about Harry's memoirs, Meghan's business ventures, or Netflix deals, within the palace, a quiet, administrative purge is happening. One that isn't loud, but irreversible. And then there's this. Multiple archival staff reportedly raised ethical concerns. Some even requested written clarification on whether such a removal was constitutional, or even historically appropriate. They weren't given answers. Instead, they were told to follow the directive. No questions. And in case you're wondering if this has ever happened before, no, not like this. Edward VIII was removed from certain ceremonial roles following his abdication, but his place in the family was never struck from lineage records. Even scandal-ridden royals from centuries past, some of them exiled or imprisoned, remained recorded. But here, there's a sense that something more radical is unfolding. One analyst called it a royal annulment. Another source claimed the decree uses a rarely invoked clause, previously reserved for internal administrative errors, that allows the sovereign to correct matters of lineage where recognition no longer serves the crown. And here's where it gets stranger. That clause. It was last used in 1964, for a clerical correction involving a distant cousin. This time, it's being used to strike the king's own son. But this isn't just about Harry. Because just when Meghan thought she'd been spared from the worst of it, the coat of arms was revoked. Personally, silence can be strategy, but sometimes it's a warning. Meghan Markle hasn't said a word publicly since news of the royal decree leaked. No interviews, no official statement, not even a spokesperson comment to deflect or reframe. But behind the scenes, something is brewing. Sources close to the Sussex camp suggest the atmosphere is tense, controlled, almost surgical. Meghan, they say, is livid, but deliberate. She's not reacting emotionally, not publicly at least. Because in her mind, this isn't just a personal attack. It's an institutional humiliation. And yet, there's no lawsuit, no video, no podcast monologue. Not yet. That's what's unsettling. Because Meghan's silence isn't passive, it's pointed. It's the kind of silence that suggests calculation, timing, and maybe retaliation. Now contrast that with Harry. Harry isn't silent, but he's not loud either. His response, we're told, was direct, but private. And it wasn't sent to the king. It was sent to Princess Anne. Let that sink in. According to two individuals with knowledge of the matter, Harry made a personal appeal to his aunt, someone he reportedly trusts more than any other senior royal at this point. The message was emotional, restrained, but unmistakably urgent. He wasn't asking for his title back. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for his children, Archie and Lilibet. Their names, their place in the family. Not for the public, not for the cameras, but for the record. It said the message made its way to Charles. Whether it was passed along gently or with quiet protest, no one knows. But what we do know is that it didn't work. Because days later, the coat of arms Meghan once shared with Harry, granted by the College of Arms, displayed proudly at their wedding, was officially nullified. Not paused, not archived, nullified. And unlike previous royal spouses whose arms remained intact even after divorce or scandal, Meghan's wasn't merely revoked. It was struck from the heraldic register altogether. That's not standard protocol. It's rare, possibly unprecedented for a living member not convicted of a crime. And here's what's even more strange. The document authorizing the erasure reportedly bears a second signature. Not just Charles's. An aide to the Lord Lion King of Arms. That's the royal officer responsible for heraldry in Scotland, where the monarchy holds deeper, older traditions. The implication? This wasn't just a Windsor decision. It was reviewed and executed with ancient authority. Which brings us back to Harry. We've confirmed that in the days following the decree, he wrote a personal letter to his father. It wasn't routed through lawyers. It wasn't sent as a royal formality. Just a plain envelope. On the front, in Harry's handwriting. To my father. What's inside that letter remains unknown. But even that letter, marked from your son, was returned, unopened. There's a particular weight to a letter that's never opened. Not because of what it says, but because someone made the decision not to read it. And that's where we find ourselves now. Not in a firestorm. Not in a tabloid frenzy. But in the cold, echoing aftermath of a decision that wasn't shouted, only signed. The decree is done. The ink has dried. Harry and Meghan are no longer Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Their coat of arms has been erased. Their lineage, within the palace infrastructure, is gone. And yet, there's been no press conference, no royal statement. Just quiet logistics. Updates to records. Names struck through with a keystroke. A generation omitted. But it's not the facts alone that sting. It's what they suggest. Because when a monarch chooses to erase, not exile, not admonish, but erase, there's no longer an open door. Not even a ceremonial one. And that shifts the entire foundation beneath the royal family. It reframes history in real time. Charles didn't just remove Harry and Meghan from their roles. He severed their recognition, removed their meaning. He made a statement not to the press, but to the system. These names no longer serve the crown. It's a kind of royal finality we haven't seen in the modern era. But here's what lingers. The emotional contradiction. The very man who once walked his daughter-in-law down the aisle, who held his grandson on the day he was born, now signs off on a document erasing them both from the family ledger. The man who urged compassion and understanding in his first speech as king now deletes his own bloodline from royal memory. And yet, there's no shouting, no scandal, just the quiet sound of names disappearing from a page. You have to ask yourself, was this about protecting the monarchy or punishing a betrayal? Did Charles act as sovereign or as father? And maybe most importantly,